Imagine being a veteran waiting for care, and then you hear that top VA senior executives decide to give themselves nearly $11 million in essentially fraudulent bonuses. In fact, a decade ago, the VA Inspector General found that over 300,000 veterans died before their applications for care were ever processed. That doesn't mean that all 307,000 were actively seeking care and that they would have lived had they had their application processed in time, because old age and death do happen to us all, no matter what. But how many of those veterans were actively trying to receive the care they needed for an active medical issue they were suffering and therefore had their lives cut needlessly short? Well, that report comes to mind while reading about this latest bonus scandal, in which 182 senior executives received between $39,000 and over $100,000 each through a program which was designed to recruit more highly skilled employees to deal with the VA recruitment shortage. The corruption was first identified internally back in September, but 8 months later, and the money still hasn't been recouped yet. Part of the problem is that many of these senior executives have already spent their bonuses, and so they don't have the cash on hand to reimburse the department. Though I will mention here that plenty of actually impoverished veterans get nickeled and dimed to death by this department all the time, even for paperwork or payment discrepancies that aren't their fault at all. So if the VA really wanted to, I think they could get their money back. Anyway, joining us now to discuss is John Byrnes, a senior advisor for Concerned Veterans for America. John, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me on, Kara.
So your organization is calling for resignations in the wake of the scandal. Talk to us about that.
So the VA Undersecretary for Health and the VA Undersecretary for Benefits, Einhall and Jacobs are their names, they gave out over $11 million in bonuses last year based on the PAC Act and what the PAC Act was supposed to do. The PAC Act was designed with this money, this account was designed to, as you mentioned, hire frontline VA providers and to go directly to the veterans who suffered from burn pits and other toxic exposures overseas. Instead, these two undersecretaries decided that they should give it out to their senior most employees. One of them, when pressed on it, didn't even know how many employees were in the department. There were 105 senior executive service members in that department who got bonuses.
And of course, they're saying that, well, a lot of this money's already been spent. We're going to try and recoup some of it. But, here we are, I think even 8 months later on that process, and it's not exactly happening. And I know, as you and I have talked about before, there are veterans. One story comes to my mind specifically. I think you and I even talked about it months ago, but there was a man and he was getting his VA benefits, but then also, I believe, Social Security, and something had happened where he wasn't allowed to receive both for some reason. And this man was very impoverished. He's an elderly man. He has a lot of medical ailments. And the VA system said, well, tough luck. We think we've overpaid you. And again, this is a man that has not even a penny to his name, essentially. But they're telling him that he's been overpaid for however many years. And so they were cutting back on the benefits. And again, this man barely has even the bare necessities that he needs to live. And this was not his fault whatsoever. In this specific story, he had provided them all the documented evidence saying, I've never lied. I've never, misconstrued anything. Any paperwork error was solely on your guys' side. They didn't care. They got their money back, and they didn't care what that did to that poor veteran. So when you hear some of the excuses being made now that this was just a mistake, there was some oversight, the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand on this matter, and well, guess we'll just have to deal with the money loss. I mean, what comes to your mind when you hear some of these excuses from the VA on the scandal?
It's par for the course for them, right? We talked a few weeks ago about it being the 10th anniversary of the Phoenix VA scandal, which involved bonuses and lying. And we're still faced 10 years later with a VA that is more concerned with giving bonuses to its employees than it is about telling the truth about what's going on in the institution, and certainly about providing timely quality care to the veterans. Folks who are interested in this can go to www.cv4a.org and take action, right? Just click our Take Action button. There's a couple of places on there where you can send messages to your senators and your congressman or congresswoman and telling them to get the VA's act together.
And as you bring up with the Phoenix scandal, can you refresh our memories on that? Because it seems that there are definitely some parallels there.
Absolutely parallels. So back in 2014 at the Phoenix VA, it was discovered that the administrator of the hospital was basically keeping two sets of books, one which she sent to Washington, D.C., saying, we're meeting our wait times. The veterans are all getting their care in exactly the amount of time or under the amount of time that we're required to get them the care by. Meanwhile, in Phoenix, they were keeping a set of books that showed that many, many, many veterans were not getting the care that they deserve, the care that they earn within the windows of the rules at the VA itself. She was just lying because she and her senior employees wanted their bonuses. And it turned out that this wasn't just a problem in Phoenix, it was a problem nationwide.
And I believe after that, around 2017, that Congress acted, or they were acting, to protect whistleblowers, those who came forward about these matters, and then also to make it easier to weed out bad employees within the VA. But here we are, 7 years even past 2017, and it doesn't seem like much has changed, does it?
No, there have been three major reform bills since 2014. The Choice, Transparency, and Accountability Act back then gave us the choice card. There was the VA Whistleblower Protection and Accountability Act, and I got that backwards, Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act in 2017, and the Mission Act in 2018. And in case of each of these laws, the VA bureaucracy, its leadership, has fought tooth and nail to keep the reform from happening, and then found ways to work around it.
And when it comes to some of these calls for resignations, do you think that we're going to see it, or is it just to keep pressure and just to keep that spotlight on what exactly the VA has been up to try and, create some kind of change by, bringing in the light and hoping that works as a disinfectant?
Well, we'd like to see these individuals resign. They should. They have cheated the American taxpayer. They've done no service. They've done disservice to the veterans who were counting on them for benefits and health care. Back in 2014, we were calling for the resignation of the then VA Secretary Eric Shinseki, former general from the U.S. Army. We called for his resignation. Eventually, when the scandal came out about the Phoenix VA, he resigned. So these two individuals absolutely should resign, and frankly, should never ever be allowed into public service again.
No, definitely. I'm right there with you on that. But, you've talked about, and we've talked about before, and you were mentioning it again here tonight, about how there's a scandal, then there's calls for some sort of reform. Some of them may even get passed even at the federal level. And then a year or two later, we're kind of back in the same boat, and we find ourselves in the same cycle on and on and on again. So what do you think it'll take to actually break through that cycle? Is it just a matter of, is there just too much money floating around the VA where corrupt actors just siphon it off for themselves and just keep the gravy boat going? Or what exactly do you think is the cause of this? And then therefore, how can we address that root cause?
Well, it's a complex situation, but like much of the federal government, it's overgrown bureaucracy that's looking out for its own interests, that has a large employee base, and therefore having more employees, every bureaucrat wants more employees, a bigger budget, and the VA is wasting taxpayers' dollars on side projects, on bonuses, but they're not spending what they should be on taking care of veterans' health. They've been continually denying veterans the community care that was built into the Mission Act. There was a Red Team report that was released recently, was released through whistleblowers, through Empower Oversight. It showed that the VA is actively working to find ways around every rule that they wrote under the Mission Act to get veterans that community care.
And of course, being a veteran yourself and having served overseas, you've been deployed even to some hot combat zones. So when you are talking amongst yourself with other veterans and you heard just this latest scandal, what was the reaction to it that you heard within the veteran community?
It's total astonishment and disgust with the system that prioritizes bureaucrats over veterans' health care. As you mentioned, veterans have served in conflicts, especially the last 20 years, from 2001 to 2021. We had folks overseas everywhere, Afghanistan, Iraq, now Syria. It's still going on in Syria and other hotspots, small hotspots in the Middle East. And the VA is collecting bonuses, and veterans aren't taking, they're not getting the health care they deserve. At the same time, you see a mental health crisis and a suicide crisis in a whole new generation of veterans.
It's really just gut-wrenching, I think. Also, if you're a veteran and you served and you gave so much, this is the least the nation can do, right, to pay you back for giving everything of yourself to this nation. And then to hear, well, we don't have the money for this, and you'll have to come out of pocket for that, and money this and money that. And then you hear these scandals and you hear, oh no, there is money. It's just not going to the people who actually need the money. And so a lot of veterans are left with very long wait times. They're left with bills that they should not not be getting, bills that are really inflated as well. I mean, on and on this litany continues. So I really do appreciate the work that you guys do in consistently bringing this to light and creating that change that we do need to see.